Hello again, God be with you all. Well, I'm sat here in the conservatory. I've got my book of more Bible tales. I'm going to read another one. This one covers something that I've often thought about when I've read the story. It's a story from the New Testament. It's a story which involves Jesus, of course. And this story is called the Swineherd's version. My dad and I walked into the room and sat down. The man on the other side of the table looked very serious. He didn't speak to us at first. I looked at my dad. My dad looked at me. I shuffled my feet. He folded and unfolded his hands. Neither of us knew what to expect. Finally, the man smiled, but I wouldn't say that it was a friendly smile exactly, more like something he was supposed to do. Now then, he said, my name is Mr. Balak, and I work for the 10 Towns Mutual Assurance Company. And you are Farmer Swine? That's right, my dad nodded. And this is, he asked, looking at me, my son, Swine Jr. He was there on the day of the attack. Yes, well, said Mr. Balak, that is why we're here, isn't it? Because of what you call the attack. Well, I've already told the other man everything that happened, said my dad defensively. It was an attack. My pigs were killed. I don't know what else there is to say. Let's go over the details of the case, said Mr. Balak, and then perhaps you will understand why I have called this meeting. Dad was sweating. He always sweated when he was nervous. Sweated like a pig. That's what he'd always say. And given his job and our name, that was funny. But it wasn't funny now. Mr. Balak cleared his throat and began. As I understand it, you say that your entire herd of pigs plunged off a hill at the edge of your property into the sea, where they drowned. Furthermore, you say that this was the fault of a Jewish rabbi called Jesus, who was standing in a cemetery at the seaside below. That's right, my dad nodded. That's exactly what happened. Muttered Mr. Balak. We shall see. Now then, your insurance policy does indeed cover acts of violence towards your herd. However, we have been unable to uncover any evidence that proves your claim to be true. Granted, some of your neighbours saw a rabbi and his followers at the seaside that day, but no one saw him approach your herd or attempt to disturb it in any way. He did not have a stick. There were no dogs present. Nothing, in fact, that could be used to chase even one pig off a cliff, much less an entire herd. Oh, I never said the man used a stick, my dad replied. It was unusual what Jesus did, yes, but it was his fault. You talked to my witness, didn't you? Mr. Balak nodded and harumphed. Your witness, yes. We did interview the witness that you suggested to us, and he did tell us a story similar to the one we heard from you. He explained that he was wandering among the tombs when Jesus and his disciples suddenly appeared on the shore. He described how he approached Jesus and how Jesus then cast a collection, legion is the word he used, of demons out of him and into your herd of pigs. And according to him, that is why they then leaped to their watery doom. Well, there you go, grinned my dad, slamming his hand on the table. It was Jesus' fault. My witness saw him do it. Now all you need to do is pay me what my herd was worth, and my son and I will be on our way. Sadly, it's not as simple as that, replied Mr. Balak. And now there was nothing even approaching a smile on his face. I know you believe that this should have convinced us of the truth of your case. The only problem, Farmer Swine, is that you failed to tell us that your witness was a madman. Nutcase, lunatic, bonkers. That is how your neighbours describe this witness, Farmer Swine. According to our sources, he has spent much of the last few years of his life among the tombs, naked because of his illness, and chained, we can only guess, so that his mad ranges would not prove harmful to himself or to others. While it is true that he seemed perfectly normal during our interview, our experts have told us that madmen are very good at pretending to be normal. So the story he told us about Jesus and the demons could also have been the result of his madness. It certainly sounds mad to me. But he's all right now, I blurted out. Doesn't that count for something? They both turned and looked at me. Who is all right? Asked Mr. Ballock. The madman, I answered. He's not crazy anymore. He doesn't have to be chained. He wears clothes. Doesn't that mean you should trust what he says? Young man, Mr. Ballock replied, looking down his nose at me, unless you are an expert in mental disease as well as a swineherd, what you say is a matter of opinion, and opinion only. The man was not in his right mind when this so-called attack occurred, so how can his evidence be trusted? And speaking of mad, and here he turned his withering gaze upon my dad, let's talk about your own failure to provide fencing at the edge of the cliff. Demons or no demons, a good strong fence would have stopped your pigs from their deadly plunge, and they would be alive, rooting and snorting happily today. Mr. Ballock folded his arms across his chest. No, Farmer Swine, in the absence of any other witnesses, we are going to have to reject your claim. You are free, of course, to find this rabbi and sue him for damages in civil court. But we suspect that the judge will be as sceptical of your witness's account as we are. We are sorry for your loss, but you must understand that insurance fraud is common these days and costs everyone, company and customer alike. This is not to imply in any way that we suspect your motives. It is simply a sad fact that every claim must be dealt with thoroughly. And in your case, the facts do not add up. It is unfortunate that your pigs plunged from the cliff to their deaths, but we can see no connection between that event and any human action. In the end, we must chalk it up as an act of God and leave it as that. If you have any further questions, do not hesitate to contact me at your convenience. So I don't get any money? Asked my dad. Not a fig, I'm afraid, replied Mr. Ballock. As I think I said clearly, your insurance policy covered an attack on your herd, and there simply was no attack. But that was my whole living, my dad sighed. What am I supposed to do now? I'm afraid I have no answer for that, said Mr. Ballock, rising from the table. But I do have another appointment, so if you will excuse me, and he headed for the door. I couldn't do it. I couldn't hold it any longer. What if there were another witness? I asked. Someone who wasn't crazy. And now I was sweating too. Mr. Ballock turned and looked at me. What other witness? He asked. Me, I mumbled. You? Said my dad. But you were up on the hill with the pigs. That's what you told me. You tried to stop them, but they ran right past you. That's what you said. Are you saying that you've been lying to me all this time? Yes, I whispered. Sorry, I whispered too. I knew you'd be angry if you found out. I thought you'd blame me for the pigs, but I don't think I could have stopped them anyway. That is not the point, young man, said Mr. Ballock, returning to his seat. The point is, where were you? Down in the cemetery, I confessed, with Colin. You know, the madman. Except he's not mad anymore, he really isn't. But he was mad then, said my dad. Well, yes, I suppose so, I shrugged. But I knew him, sort of. Well as you can know any crazy, naked, chained up person. I was on the hill every day watching the pigs, and he was down there in the cemetery doing his crazy naked thing. And at first I was just curious. So I went down there, and he sort of screamed at me for a bit. So I started leaving him bits of my lunch, which he liked. And then we got to saying, hi, and how are you doing? And then, well, must be off, lots to do. Your mother will go spare when she finds out, my dad shouted again. That's why I never said anything. I didn't want you to worry. He was chained up. I kept my distance, like I said. I'm sorry. Mr. Barrett cleared his throat. Leaving your family issues and returning to the point for a moment, what exactly did you see and hear, young man, when you were down in the cemetery? Everything that Colin told you, I replied. All right, I was hiding behind a tomb because I didn't know who the people in the boat were. But I peeked out from time to time, and I heard it all. Jesus told the demons that were in Colin to go into our herd of pigs. And you are certain that they were demons in Colin because they kept screaming, Jesus, Son of God, don't torture us. Jesus, don't send us into the abyss. Like I said, I heard everything, and it was really scary. My dad looked at Mr. Ballock. So, does this change anything? He asked. There is a part of me, said Mr. Ballock, that wants to be suspicious about this sudden turn of events. But there is another part of me that saw the look on your face when your son confessed that he was in the graveyard. A part that believes you were truly surprised. So I will give both of you and he the benefit of the doubt. You will receive money to buy a replacement herd, farmer swine, but can I suggest that you use at least part of that fund to build yourself a sturdy fence? And maybe hire myself a swineherd who doesn't have crazy friends, my dad added, looking at me. No worries, Dad, I said. I'll never leave the herd again, promise. I'd take his word for that, said Mr. Ballock. After all, in the end, he did save your bacon. And he shook my hand and my dad's hand and smiled. A real smile this time. My dad smiled too. And why shouldn't he? The swines had pigs again. I must admit, as I said, it's one of those stories that kind of worried me, that when Jesus sent all the pigs diving into the lake, what happened to the poor farmers, the people who owned them? Well, at least in this version of the story, there was a happy ending. That's it for this week. Perhaps another story next week. God be with you.